What does it actually mean to specialize? Why is it so critical for creatives to do so? And also, why is it so hard for creatives to do so? We're going to be discussing that today. But before we begin, if you are into entrepreneurship in the creative industry and living your best remote work life, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell. And if you enjoy the content of today's show, go ahead and give us a like. All right, let's do this. So there's a book called the Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns, and I've got a hard copy right here. And I have to tell you, the first time I encountered the content of this book, I actually listened to it. And the audio version of it, I was taking so many notes. It's like every single paragraph. It's only 138 pages. It takes 2.5 hours to listen to, which is about as long as a movie. And I was just so blown away by the content. It was just ticking off all of the reasons that I was struggling as a creative, all of the problems I had been facing over the years. Now, certainly it was many more years after that until I actually found legitimate solutions to those problems. But this is the one thing that flipped the switch in my head and made me realize the problem with my creative brain and how to start on the path to fixing those things. It was a difficult journey. It was challenging, but it was worth every single second of doing it. And so today we're going to be talking about the first of 12 proclamations in the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And the first one is we will specialize. Now, this one I think was probably the hardest one for me to wrap my mind around. And based on the content of the book, it seems that it's also a hard thing for many, many other creatives. So this guy knows what he's talking about. So we're going to dig in. All right. It says first, if we are not seen as more expert than our competition, then we will be viewed as one in a sea of many, and we will have little power in our relationships with our clients and prospects. This is true. And we're going to get into why that is. But next, he makes the point that the world is drowning in undifferentiated creative businesses. This is also true. You know, when I first started off and created my own business, I was offering logos, graphic design, and websites. And I thought the thing that set me apart was just my particular style and my skill. And you know, that is a differentiator, but guess what? There's like millions of other people doing the exact same thing. And so how do you stand out in a sea of so many people? It's a really challenging thing to decide upon and figure out how to do. And so what he says is what the world needs and what the better clients are willing to pay for and what our people want to develop and deliver is deep expertise. So this is the key, according to Blair, and I believe he's absolutely correct here based on my own experience, is deep expertise is so important because there's a lot of people out there doing generic work, and they're all over the place. You know, I was taking in clients just from wherever. I was like, I'm going to cast a wide net. I'm going to be everything to everybody. And that's a mistake because then I don't get to specialize in any one area. So when I get a new client, I got to do a ton of research into their business, all this extra effort. And, I may not be able to, let me just reverse on that. I will not be able to provide as good of an experience as another creative professional who specializes in that area. For example, let's say a construction company comes to me, and it could be, I don't know, any kind of construction company, like high-rise downtown skyscrapers. I grew up in Corpus Christi. There's a couple of big buildings, but there's no skyscrapers down there. And I don't know anything about constructing skyscrapers and things like that. But if they came to me, would I be able to market their business correctly? Would I be able to create the brand strategy and all the things necessary for that particular business? I could probably do a decent job. But imagine that for years and years, I had been developing very deep expertise in the arena of building skyscrapers, marketing those types of businesses, positioning those types of construction companies to sell to the people with budgets to construct those types of buildings, right? Now, if I had that level of deep expertise, I could immediately separate myself from all of the competition. How many other people are that niched down to where they do brand strategy and all the brand collateral and assets and marketing and advertising for that specific type of client who has that specific type of need? Now, if you can make a name for yourself in that business, everyone will come to you. There's a story told, man, I can't remember who tells this story, but it was about this woman who is producing dance clothing for people that dance on horseback. I didn't know that was a thing, but I guess she's the only company in the world that develops dance costumes for people who dance on horses. And she's got like 80,000 customers. It's crazy, right? And so you wouldn't think that there would be a large market, but I do believe that we can seriously underestimate the actual size of the niches that are out there. A lot of us, I think, we want to have the potential to advertise to millions and millions of clients, but as a creative firm, I can't have millions and millions of clients. I can't even have thousands of clients per year. I mean, having hundreds of clients per year is a massive stretch. I pretty much deal with small handfuls of clients throughout the year, and many of them on an ongoing basis. I have a smaller base of clients, but I generate revenue from them, many of them continually. So I have residual income coming from a small handful of clients that I specialize in what they need, and then I can continually deliver value to them instead of having to have tons and tons of clients. I mean, the main thing is in creative services, you can scale certain things. Like if I'm doing digital downloads, I can sell that to millions and millions. But to sell my thinking, my consulting, and some of the creative work that I do, creative work takes time. Some of the things that we work on can take weeks and weeks. It's not just like a single one and done purchase. Like you go to the store and buy a TV, you go to the store and you buy gas and other, commodities and things like that. So a creative firm needs to operate differently than some of the other businesses we're used to seeing. And I think that's the main problem, is creative people don't understand business very well. I know I didn't for a very long time, and I certainly have a ton more to learn, but I have made massive leaps in that arena, and it's been completely life-changing. So let's continue. Let's talk more about positioning. So positioning, Blair says, is the foundation of business development success and of business success. So what is positioning? The Economic Times says, positioning defines where your product, item, or service stands in relation to others offering similar products and services in the marketplace, as well as in the mind of the consumer. So this is very, very important. And so what I do with my clients is I do strategic branding as a base foundation for everything else. And the reason I do that is because I believe it's so critically important. This positioning factor is key. It was key to my business, but it's also key to every other business. So I always start by helping my clients position themselves. A lot of people will come to me for a logo. They come to me for a website, but I want to take a step backward and look at their positioning. And that's where I incorporate strategic branding to help and assist with that positioning. So this is actually a screenshot from one of my brand books in its default format. And so it has a positioning statement, mission statement, and vision statement. I only have the positioning statement here, but I put this little quote in here. It says the positioning statement is internal facing, meaning that it's for the people involved in the business and not for the public. The mission and vision statements are external facing statements that are for the public and can be used in all public messaging. And so a positioning statement, there's many different formulations of what a positioning statement can be. I typically start with this particular framework. And so it begins with the brand name, and it provides what solution for what target audience. experiencing what pain point by what differentiation, because, and then you list the key reasons to believe. That's a positioning statement. And so the positioning statement is so important. I've built entire homepages of websites just based off a positioning statement, because immediately you have all these key points that can be extrapolated into more content that you can use to make a point and sell what you do to the world, essentially. But this positioning is key. It helps to separate you from the others in the market. And the goal of positioning is to reduce or outright eliminate the competition. Wouldn't that be nice to basically reduce or eliminate competition? But that's exactly what positioning does. And the problem is so many people are afraid to niche down and afraid to really position themselves toward a specific target audience that they end up being so general that they appeal to nobody. So let's dig into this a little more. So Blair says there's 3 steps of positioning. These 3 steps are very, very key. The first one, he says, is you got to choose a focus. And he calls this the difficult business decision. And he capitalizes the first letter of each of those words. And he repeats this phrase over and over again, the difficult business decision. This is where people get stuck. They want to have it all. And they think the world is their oyster and they're just going to be everything to everybody. And like magic, people are just going to flock to them and buy their services because I don't know what it is about us. We suddenly think that we're better than everyone else and we are entitled to people's business, but this just simply isn't the case. What ends up happening is, if you consider gas stations, if you drive down the road, you see gas stations all over the place, right? You know, in this picture, there's Exxon and then there's a mobile gas station. What's the difference between these 2 gas stations? You know, the logo and the brand and the experience and everything. But at the end of the day, which gas station are you going to go to? It's going to be the one with the cheapest gas. Now, there may be other factors. Like if you're on a road trip, you may go to like a Buc-ee's, a Flying J, a Love's, some of those instead of like some of the smaller gas stations can be really crappy, dirty bathrooms. But the larger kind of trucking stations, they give you a much better experience. And so you might go to one of those. There's a clear difference between there's differentiation there, right? But typically when you're driving through a city and there's just, you know, a Shell, an Exxon, Texaco, whatever, you're going to be shopping based on price. That's the way most people do it because there really isn't a huge difference in the product that you're getting. And the average person clearly doesn't understand the difference. We're not gasoline experts. We pump it into our car. We never even see it. You know, it just goes into the car and makes the car work. And so it's not like you could taste the gasoline or you know which one is going to be better for your car. I mean, you've got like unleaded, premium. They give you a couple different options. Most people are just sticking unleaded in their cars. But basically speaking, this is how we often look as creatives to our customers. They just look out, they see a graphic designer, a logo designer, and they're like, okay, what's the price? What's the best price I can get here? Now, do they care about the quality? Yes, there is a little bit of difference there, but kind of like the gasoline, there's a lot of people that don't really have too much experience with designers and design in general to where they don't really know how to judge if something's good or not. It's just if it looks good or not. And they don't really know that until they've seen the work on the tail end. And so it could be a difficult process for people. And there's a lot of people who simply, maybe they don't care a lot about their logo. They don't care a lot about these things. And so anyway, this is what a lot of us can end up looking like to the world. Here's 2 examples. There's their thing and then my thing. What's the difference between these 2 things? Not much. It's just kind of like gas stations, right? Looks like the exact same thing. So we look down at the price is exactly the same. If it looks like it's the same thing and the price is the same thing, then you can pick either one. Doesn't matter. You're going to get the same thing. Now, is this the type of situation that you want to be in? Now, multiply this by, thousands of different options that are out there. you're going to be completely lost in the mix, right? So one of the things we could do is we can create differentiation. We could offer something that's a little different and perhaps even a little bit more expensive. So now when you're looking at these two things, the other one, this one clearly looks different. It's a little bit more exciting. It's a little bit more expensive. So if I had to choose between the two, my decision-making process, I might want to save money. And if I want to save money, I'll buy that one. But let's say I want better quality and I want something different, then I'm going to buy this one. And there's always going to be people who are going to want the one thing over the other. Now, what happens if I don't just change the look of it, but actually change the total collective value in the stack of services or items or whatever that I'm offering, to where there's a clear distinction? When you look at the one over on the right, now the new My Thing, there's more colors. It just says more. There's more colors. There's more quantity. The perception is that there is simply more here. The price is 4 times greater. But the implication here is that the thing on the right, My Thing, is better. And the people that want better, they don't want the cheap thing. There's now a very clear distinction between the two. Now, you may have argued that by creating this new My Thing on the right, I have narrowed my audience down to a certain segment of people. All the people that want the cheap, bland, plain thing, they're not going to want this thing anymore. They probably can't even afford it anymore. And maybe it's too much for what they need. But that's fine, because now you're appealing to an audience who sees that and says, yes, immediately, that's the thing I want. And they're going to buy it and they're going to pay 4 times more. So you got to ask yourself, where do you want to be? I'll give you another example here. So this is a screenshot of Yelp. You'll notice that in the filters for restaurants, there are 4 options. And there are 4 different dollar signs here. So you can choose a cheap restaurant or a very expensive restaurant or something in between. So you have to ask yourself, why on earth would you want to choose the pricing of the restaurant? Why would somebody want to choose the most expensive? Wouldn't everybody just hit the single dollar sign and want the cheapest meal they could possibly get? No. It's not how it works. You see, there's different reasons for why the pricing is different. So this may be a little small if you're viewing this on mobile. I would go to landscape mode, definitely. And it's probably best if you're viewing this on a desktop. And I know if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, you're not totally seeing some of these things. But what we have here is 2 different columns showing different restaurants and some screenshots of some of their key food options. What you'll notice is that the reviews are pretty dang close to identical. The $1 sign side has really good reviews, really great looking pictures. The $4 sign side also has almost exactly the same level of reviews and pictures, but the difference is in the type of food. So over on the left, we've got rotisserie chicken, tacos, bird biscuit, Granny's tacos, more tacos, right? 3 different taco joints in here, because Mexican food, Chinese food, I believe that they're the cheapest types of food to produce. I mean, it's beans and rice and tortillas and enriched bleached flour and corn flour, things like that. And over on the right, what do we have? There's a nice looking garlic bread up here. We've got a grill, several grills. There's one sushi place, and the rest of it looks like beef and garlic bread and everything up there. So there's definitely different types of food at different price points. And if you're wanting to go out for a nice dinner and you're looking for restaurants, and maybe it's an anniversary, or you have a colleague coming into town, you want a nice place, you don't want in your search results to see all the fast food joints in there. You want to see the higher end places, right? And so both of these segments, both of these types of businesses are likely experiencing success. The cheap food probably does really high volume, and they make a lot of money off being accessible to a wider array of people using food that's very cheap to produce. While these nicer restaurants are likely serving a smaller segment of the community, but their food is priced higher because it takes a lot more work to make. The raw food products, getting a big steak like this is obviously going to be more expensive to obtain than simply, ground beef that you can buy cheaply somewhere that's mixed with a bunch of other spices and other ingredients. Where over here, the meat itself has to stand alone and it's more isolated. And so the quality obviously has to be better. And so this is just a kind of a really clear example to me of where you have people operating at two different levels. Now, these are very similar things, though. This is all food, right? So they all operate in the same category, but there's a very different set of circumstances when you're looking at something like food or even gas or more commodity-based products and even some services to creative services specifically. And creative services, like I've said before, they cannot be mass produced. They're far more tricky and difficult. There's an art to it. There's also the deep expertise that has to be obtained as well. So as creatives, positioning is especially key for us. Now, number 2, we're going to go to the second one here. There were 3 steps of positioning. The second one is that we need to articulate that focus that we've chosen via a consistent claim of expertise. So what that means is in all of our communications with our audience, every interaction with our own target audience, our own niches that we've chose to focus on, we need to consistently articulate our claim of expertise. I do this on social media. I'm doing this on the podcast right now. So I'm talking about something that I've developed some very deep expertise in. I'll publish some of this on my social media channels, and anywhere you could possibly get information from me, I'm going to be talking about these types of things. And everything I'm saying is going to always go back to that claim of expertise that I have. And I have to do a good job every single time at making sure that I articulate it, that it makes sense, that people understand it. And so that's also the challenge. But it's easier to do when I have a focus and I have a target audience that I'm going after. So the third step, this is very important. The third step is to work to add the missing skills, capabilities, and processes necessary to support our new claim. So let's say and it would be a new claim if you're all of a sudden going, oh my gosh, I need to make some changes here. This is my new claim. I did this several years ago when I pivoted my company Vector over to a branding agency where it was one of these just kind of generic, undifferentiated companies. So I had to pivot. And so I changed all of the text on my website. I changed my LinkedIn profile. I changed tons and tons of things so that I could support my new claim. I also built out the processes, the frameworks. I put these things into systems so that they could be explained and easily understood. It was a very radical change in what I was doing before. And I'm also going to do a shameless plug for a second. That's what I teach at remotecreative.io through my B3T framework course. I take everything that I basically did to pivot and give other people a shortcut. So that's an example of a way that you could get access to those new skills. There's coaching, there are courses, there are things available out there that can enable you to make that change. There's also the ability to talk to mentors, to look for help with consultants. There are many, many ways you can get assistance doing this, because doing it on your own can take a lot of time. It could be difficult. And so sometimes you could get a little bit of I don't want to mean shortcut in a bad way, but there's a more efficient path is maybe how I would word it, to getting where you need to go. Now that may take a little bit more investment on your part, an investment of time and money, but doing it yourself and figuring out yourself, you're going to end up making a lot of the mistakes that other people have already made, and they can help you leapfrog over those mistakes so that you're going straight to the solutions, if that makes sense. So there is a key for doing that. So to cover those three again, it's important to understand what they are. 1, choose a focus. 2, articulate that focus via a consistent claim of expertise. 3, work to add the missing skills, capabilities, and processes necessary to support our new claim. All right. The next thing we're going to cover are the 2 key benefits of positioning. This is also very important to take note of. The first one, when it comes to positioning, is the sales advantage. When and where we choose to compete, we win more often than not. And that's because you appeal more to a specific niche or audience. You're able to speak clearly to them. You're able to speak their language in the tone and the voice that resonates with them. And that all has to be crafted, and it's crafted through a branding process. And that's what I do and what I teach about. Just so you know here, there are methodologies and strategies to doing this that exist. And so when and where we compete, we win more often than not. Let's say I've got, for some reason, an itchy foot, and I see an ad for something on TV and it says, "Are you uncomfortable?" I mean, that may capture my attention, but if I hear another ad and it says, "Do you have an itchy foot?" then my ears are going to perk up and I'm going to go, "Oh, what's going on here?" And maybe it's an ad for Tough Actin' Tinactin, the athlete's foot, if you remember those commercials. But your ears tend to perk up when you hear something that's speaking directly to a particular problem that you're facing, and then speaks with eloquence and articulation about that problem, and they feel like they understand that problem very, very in depth. You're going to pay closer and closer attention because you're going to go, "Wow, these guys have really thought about this. It sounds like they have a solution. I want to hear their solution," because maybe they can remove this pain from my life by simply adopting their solution. So we pay attention when we hear things that resonate with us, when we hear people that understand and care about the problems that we have. Well, that's the sales advantage, and that's why you win more often than not. Second, the price premium. And this is especially important for creative businesses. When we win, we do so not by cutting price, but while charging more. And just think of the example that I shared before of, my thing and their thing. If you have 2 things that are virtually identical, you can compete by cutting price. You could go down, right? You can offer someone a lower and lower and lower price. But if you're going to do that, you had better be increasing your volume, selling more and more and more than everyone else. But if you're a solopreneur, a creative solopreneur, there's only so much of you to go around unless you're outsourcing like mad, which you could do. Those are all possibilities. There are some different exceptions to this that I think you can take. But if you are a solopreneur, you also can differentiate by raising your price, because dropping a price sends a message. Raising a price also sends a message. Now, whether you're lowering your price or raising your price, it could be a negative message or it could be a positive message. It could work both ways. So if you have some type of commodity or some type of service or whatever, and it's out there in the world and people generally know that the price of this thing is pretty stable, and all of a sudden there's a drop in price, people tend to jump on that. That's why we have sales, right? They see that drop in price and then they jump. It works good for sales. But raising a price, offering a higher price, could also get people's attention in a positive way as well. Because if you suddenly see something that you're not used to seeing and it's promising more, just like in that other example, there's more variety, there's more differentiation, there's more value to the stack, then when you see that price, you know that fewer people are going to be able to obtain this. And by you getting it, you're going to get access to something that fewer people have access to. That gives you potentially more exclusivity, more status. And in that case, a lower price is less attractive and the higher price is more attractive. It's really interesting the way our minds work. I mean, those are just a couple examples. You could probably dig into that a lot more. But basically, failure to specialize also reduces the value that you can deliver. And what I mean by that is when it comes to creative services, especially, if I want to bring the best talent to the table for my clients. So if I have a client that comes to me and they need a logo designed, and it turns out I know exactly what they need and what's going to be best for them, but let's say my particular skill set, the certain style and type of logo, isn't exactly the thing I produce. Well, I know exactly where to go to find the individual who can craft that logo. And I would outsource that work to them, and it would be a collaboration. I would take my knowledge and skills and strategy, and I would give them the instructions they need to produce the thing that maybe I can't with my own two hands, but they can, but it needs to have the thinking behind it to pull it off. Does that make sense? And so in that case, I couldn't charge the client to hire the best person that I could find and then make a profit for my business by giving them the same low price that people are charging on Fiverr. And, there's a lot of times, I've seen it happen many times, where some of these guys offering super cheap prices on logos, they're just going online and Googling a particular type of logo, and they'll just rip off other people's logos, and they don't care because they're charging like $50 or $100, or even people charging $500 for a logo. They're just, a lot of times just ripping off other people. Not all the time, not everybody does, but I've seen it often enough, especially lately, where people will come to me and they'll say, "What do you think of my logo?" I'll do a little bit of research and oops, I found it. They ripped it off from over here. So you got to be really careful. That's why you go with a professional, because there's a lot of other due diligence. There's a lot more that goes into it as well. Like I go and I search the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for the name of the company. I do very in-depth searches for existing designs and styles, and it takes a lot of extra work. It's a different process from just sitting in front of your computer, taking something else, tracing it, changing it slightly, and then selling it to the client, versus actually going out and doing your research, designing a logo off of a brand strategy, and where there's already like a brand identity or a stylescape or something to give you the overall look and feel and vibe of the company, and then make sure that logo fits in with everything. The level of things that you have to consider, like the novice is not going to understand how to design a logo that can work well with embroidery, like on my hat here, right? There are certain types of things you don't want to do. Like if you're designing it for like a food service, and they're going to be making hats and shirts, or maybe it's a insurance agent and they're going to get polos designed and embroidery is going to be factored in. If the lines anywhere in there are far too thin, it's going to give you crap embroidery, and the stuff is going to fall apart, or it's not going to look as good. And so you got to factor those things as well. Where is the logo going to appear? What is it going to appear on? There's a lot of different considerations you have to make, especially in terms of the color that you're using, RGB or CMYK. When you go to print, you have to mix the inks properly. You can't just use RGB black. You need to actually have different settings. You got 100% black with you have CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and then K is black. Well, if you want to get a rich dark black, you can't just use pure black. You have to mix in cyan, magenta, and yellow a little bit in there, and you get either rich black or designer black, as it's sometimes called. I have a special ink mix that I factor into my design files when I'm doing CMYK for print, especially if it's a super dark black. So you got to consider those types of things, and the novice isn't going to know it. I've seen professional magazines and print work where I see a faded black that looks like a washed out gray, and I just look at it and I chuckle to myself, and it's like, it's an amateur. Big professional company, but they used an amateur designer to make that ad. I could tell right away. They didn't take that into account. So you want to deal with professionals if your goal is to get the highest quality work possible and the best return on your investment when it comes to these types of things. So I tend to focus on higher end clients that want the best, so that I'm able to be really unfettered to do my best for them and to bring all of the best resources to the table. And while that can be expensive, what I have found is that upfront investment is far less expensive than having to go back and fix these things later on down the road. I know that was a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just trying to give you some context to how I'm thinking. Now, there's much more to this particular section of the book that covers specialization. And I'm certainly not going to go into all of it. I'm going to leave that for you to go and read the entire book. The whole chapter is great. There's a lot of really good stuff we skipped over, but I encourage you to go and get a copy of this book and read it for yourself. The very last paragraph of this particular section says this: "The revolution we must fight is within. There is no enemy. We are victims only of a creative mind that makes choosing a focus more difficult for us than most." And I've struggled for a long time to understand why that is. Why is it that creatives specifically struggle with it? It's not to say that other people don't struggle with it, but why do creatives struggle with it so much? My view on this is that creatives envision, they've got this great imagination, right? They see these infinite possibilities, and they love the challenge of trying to figure things out and to make things as widely acceptable as possible. And with art, I mean, there's certainly art that is very niche and focuses on a particular type of audience. But I think generally speaking, creatives, they want to produce art and they want it to be liked by everyone. And they get very upset when they create something that someone doesn't like. And so they want to appeal as widely as possible to a mass audience. They like working on a bunch of different types of projects. I mean, I can tell you early on in my career when I was doing work for all different kinds of companies and trying to find different kinds of solutions. And I loved the challenge of it and the variety of it and being able to work on so many different types of things. And so the idea of just focusing on one industry, one niche, one particular type of client just sounded boring. But at the end of the day, what I was essentially doing is limiting myself in other very important areas, such as profits and the types of clients I could go after, by spreading myself so thin. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but I was positioning myself as a commodity. I was positioning myself as just something that you could pretty much get anywhere else. I mean, I thought the main differentiator was me and me personally, and the fact that I was an honest person. I gave people the best possible results I can get. And there were certainly people that, definitely appreciated that from me, but it didn't do anything to actually raise my prices and the value of what I could have been bringing to those clients. And so I've made a complete change. Now I offer people more than just nice design work. I actually couple that with a strategy that enables that design work to be dialed in more and produced on the foundation of a solid strategic branding framework that can affect every single thing, every other interaction between the brand and the target audience that brand strategy affects, and can make each part of that interaction more engaging and more valuable to everybody involved. And so it just creates a win for the brand, a win for the target audience, a win for my agency. It's win-win-win. We all prosper together, and that's what I enjoy most. And it took me a long time to get to that point, but I would definitely say that the Win Without Pitching Manifesto was a big piece of that puzzle in shifting me away from the way of thinking that I had that was more destructive and more limiting and was definitely holding me back. So I definitely encourage a read of this book, reading the hard copy, even listening to the audiobook, do both of them because it's a very different experience. You got a 138 page book that takes 2.5 hours to listen to. You could easily listen to it and read it in one day, but you'll find yourself reading it, rereading it over and over and over again. And I got to tell you, like I've got this book just like completely marked up with notes. I just refer back to it over and over and over again because it just never ceases to deliver value to me on a continual basis. The principles apply to so many areas, and I love referring back to it over and over again. It's a staple in my office, and it's probably, I would consider, the most valuable book that I have ever purchased in terms of what it's done to my business and the type of returns that I've been able to get and the shift in the value I've been able to bring to my clients and making their businesses more successful. It hasn't just brought wealth to me, but it's brought wealth to my clients and their businesses and their hopes and dreams. And so I can't even put a number on the value that it's brought across the board. And I mean, that's really a special thing, I think. So anyway, that's it for today's show. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and give me a like. And if you haven't done it already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Remote Creative Podcast. Now get out there and create some greatness.